Okay, we're live. What's shaking, killers? What's going on, Siegfried? How you doing? Nick Hawks here, Crystal King. Got a couple things going on in the house. I'm streaming to Twitch this time, which is a new thing for me. Today is September 18th, 2024. I've got it down as 2025 on my notes, which is wrong. And we got a bunch of stuff going on. We'll hit the big news, which is Helium Nova Lonestar tracking in a bit. But I thought we'd start off with the basics and just go through what's shaken in the world of DePIN. We've got about 15 minutes here to go through kind of basic stuff in my notes, and then I will shoot the shit with you guys and cover whatever you want to cover after that. So let's kick it off with Onakoi. Onakoi's got the DePIN event in Singapore, DePIN United this week. I think it's on Thursday, so tomorrow. You can hit the link down in the description on YouTube. And then the other thing that was going on at Onakoi is I got my station up and running. I think I had it up and running last week, but I got a little bit more into it this week. I also got my torch activated so that I can use Onakoi's system to figure out where exactly that thing is down to, I think, 8 millimeters. And so I've been thinking about how do I use that thing. I think I might do some like treasure hunt stuff and say, hey, this is the location of this little thing. And maybe it's a wallet. 12-word wallet with something on it. What's up, Kevin? Good to see you, dog. All of the comments so far that I can respond to, I'm figuring out how to respond to, are on YouTube. So if I'm missing you on the tweeters, sorry about that. Okay, so that's what's going on with Onakoi over in Anyone. They did a big airdrop this week. If you've been running a Anyone relay, and you can see mine blinking or pulsing back there, you got an airdrop. I don't know what I got, 20-something. Nothing crazy, but I think they airdropped 50,000. So that was pretty cool. In Threefold, actually, I've got some new news on them that I just saw this morning. Florian, which is one of the head guys over there, is going to be talking with Balaji at Network State. So not State of the Networks, but at Network State. So that's good news, and that's kind of something that's been in the works for a long time. Pretty cool to see what those guys are doing. I had in my notes the Pulumi Infrastructure. I went over that video that they sent out last week. It was live last week. We talked a little bit about it, and it's super nerdy stuff. It's so nerdy that it's infrastructure as code. It's like, I don't know how you get much more nerdy than that, but cool to see what those guys are doing. Okay, let's see. It's Token 2049 week. So what I've noticed is a lot of folks are just head down or head up and meeting people in real life versus being on the interwebs. But kind of cool to see what's going on over there. And then the big news to drop was the Lonestar news. So Lonestar Tracking is a company. They're out of Texas, run by my buddy Tommy. I've worked with Tommy for years and years and years. He supported the paragliding tracking competition, or the competition where he tracked paragliders in Utah back in 2022, maybe 2021. It might have been 2021. So yeah, I've been hanging out with him for a long time, talking to him a long time. Super cool to see that they bought the company 1663 from Nova. So that's the first kind of the giant news there. Oh, I missed a couple things, but I'll get back to him. We can talk about him later. That's really cool to see. I know that a lot of folks in general, humans in general, don't like change. There's a lot of fear about this and saying, oh, Nova gave up on IoT. And I think what's happening, if you look at the big picture, is Nova saying, look, we want the whole thing centralized. We're going to focus on mobile. We don't have the bandwidth to do both mobile and IoT, and we want the power to be distributed out so that it's not just one company running the whole thing. You can see that in what they did last week with pushing out the... or not, was it 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, they let go of a bunch of people and they're like, hey, we don't want to be the central point of failure for the entire network. So really cool to see that Lonestar stepped up and bought it for whatever price it was they bought it for. Hopefully it was a good one, and is going to be running I think they had something like 80 customers. And then if you look at the Dune analytics, they were running more through their console than I think anyone else. So probably a pretty good, hopefully a pretty good purchase. So super, super cool to see that. Let's see. Maybe I'll skip back and we'll talk about the. I've got two articles linked in the YouTube description, both from GoldHawks. One is on hex boosting, one is on cluster incentives. If you guys want to learn about what's going on in DePIN as far as incentive side, and you want a pretty good dive into generally what we cover as incentives, those two articles are great. I'm also publishing them on the Gristle King Twitter account, so you'll be able to see them there. But if you want to just read them today. Not wait for me to publish the cluster incentives one. They're right there. That blog will come out with stuff either once a week, once every other week, and it'll be focused on DePIN and explaining what's going on DePIN to pretty normal people. Okay, so we talked about Helium stuff. We covered the Lonestar news. We haven't talked about Helium v3, which is the next big deal in Helium. Nova Labs has proposed an upgrade to the economic model. So the idea is like, hey, if you followed the Helium and Nova thing from the beginning, the general idea is, hey, we think we have a pretty good idea. We are going to execute on it until we find a better idea. When we find a better idea, we are going to begin executing on that. So Nova, as probably the single, I'm going to guess here, and this is a guess, this is not confirmed by fact, I'm sure someone can check the chain and track down all these people, is probably the single largest holder of HNT, via both HNT and HST, which is the Helium security token, which we haven't heard talked about in a while. And I think the first part of the big picture here with this change in V3 is, before we go into any of the details, just keep in the back of your mind that the folks at Nova hold, if they don't hold more HNT than anyone else, it is damnably close. And whether they hold that in HNT or HST, that's fine. If you think about what they're trying to do, and if you put them as kind of a normal person, normal people like money. They like to be able to access their money, and they like it when their stuff they have goes up in value, whether that is their house or their cryptocurrency or stocks or whatever. Nova, I don't think, is any different. It's run, as far as I can tell, or it's had significant investment from VCs. VCs like all those things. They like money. They like the ability to access their money. They like the ability to see their investments grow. And so when we think about what Nova is proposing, and I see folks saying, it's going to break, the whole thing is, it's just garbage. It's just like, that's a natural human reaction to change. I don't think that's a great valid reaction. Now, did they get all the details right? No. I'm sure they didn't. Did they get is it going to launch tomorrow? No. What they've done is say, hey, we think we have a good idea to make the network even better. We see this issue with what's going on across DePIN. There's a lack of infrastructure for DePIN projects. Obviously, that concept has already been proven out by IoTeX and Peak, saying like, hey, we're going to run an L1 specifically for DePIN. So I think if you kind of take the big perspective here and look at what's going on and whether or not this V3 change is good, it's probably a pretty good deal, maybe incorrect in some detail. So the general thing is they're going to upgrade economic model for HNT. There'll be this Helium network extension. If you want to be a super nerd and get on and read about Solana network extensions, you can. But in general, there's just going to be an upgrade to Helium overall. And the general idea is it's going to be a place for other DePINs to be able to come. And as part of that whole thing, they're going to update the mobile and IoT economics, or I should say we are going to update the mobile and IoT economics, we, the community. So they've made this proposal, same as any other general proposal. Once this gets formalized, it'll go into a HIP, and then you can vote on it. And if you don't like it, you can vote against it. If you don't care, you can proxy your vote. And if you like it, you can vote for it. So I think that's generally a good thing. Okay, so that is the Helium Mobile news, the Helium news. Let's go to the Hivemapper news. So Hivemapper, I think the cool thing with Hivemapper is they're just continuing to ship. There are more bursts in LA. So if you're a Hivemapper driver and you're driving around in LA and you had your camera turned off, turn it back on, get that thing out there and get after those bursts. It's one of those things where it's like, it's really good to see a company just doing a normal thing and shipping product and improving, right? It's not every day or every week that you have to have some giant badass thing going down. It's just one of those things like, hey, Hivemapper is continuing to do the things that we want them to do, which is to get better and better, to map more and more of the territory and to respond to customers' requests for information. Siegfried, after 2 to 3 days of a very intensive debate, this is even less than a done thing. Yeah, talking about V3. So this is, I wonder if I can, there you go. I still don't have a good way to add this in there, but yeah, I think that's the V3 thing is going to be a big thing, and maybe we do a separate show just on V3. I'll see if I can get Amir and the crew on. Unknown if that's a possibility. So there's that. Let's see. We did Hivemapper. The next thing I did is DIMO. Max and I talked to Jason Bedeau over at Daylight. this week. Super cool to see what DIMO is doing working with Daylight, which is a VPP or virtual power plant. And then I think they also partner with NATIX, I saw in their Discord. So this is the next kind of big thing I think we're going to see across DePINs, and this will happen for the next couple months, and has happened, is we're going to see more and more partnerships across DePINs. That's just what's going to happen, is they all are starting to realize like, hey, we could do this on our own. We could do it a lot faster together. Let's all work together and figure out how we do this in a much better way. And DIMO, I think, DIMO and Helium are probably leading the charge on how they say, hey, this is what we're going to do together. Wingbits has announced, I think that's the old, that is the old logo. I've got the new one somewhere. I just don't have it right here. Wingbits has announced that they closed a $3.5 million, investment from Borderless and Tribe Capital. So super cool to see that going down. It just means they have money to do the things that they need to do. And we love seeing that stuff. On the Spexi side, they announced that same kind of thing as Hivemapper, like, hey, we've got, $3,500 worth of Spexigones up in Detroit. So JayM, I think you're in Detroit. Get a drone on Amazon and start flying that thing. But again, really good to see these companies just shipping kind of product shipping services and figuring this stuff out. Over at Sourceful, they opened, oh shit, I've got to update their thing too. Their logo. Over at Sourceful, they opened up sales for the energy gateways. They look just like the original Rack V2 Helium hotspots. They are Helium hotspots. And one thing to note here that is pretty damn cool is it is now $180 for a hotspot. So if you just wanted an IoT hotspot and you wanted to do the ability to do Sourceful stuff too, so do the VPP thing, in order for you to do the power side, you're going to need photovoltaic and an inverter, and it has to match their system. But if you just want a hotspot, it's $180. I know that a lot of us remember back in the summer of 2021, hotspots were $10,000 on eBay. So really cool to see them down to $180. I think that's one of the power portions of DePIN, is that through economies of scale, you get things that used to be super expensive. Now they're cheaper. So super cool. Over in WeatherXM, I've been messing with my WeatherXM, which is right there. It's not consistently connecting to my weather station, so they sent me an antenna because I lost the first one. I've had that thing for years. Put that in last night. I couldn't get the external antenna to work. As soon as I put it in, turned it on, nothing happened. When I took it off, it went back to kind of intermittently connecting. If I look at it right now, it's connected right now. It's 64 degrees, 20 feet over my head, so that's great. Every so often it'll turn off, but whatever. It's not the biggest deal. The big news over at WeatherXM is they've got two things. They are going to increase the liquidity for WeatherXM ETH over on Uniswap. So that's good to see. I'm not sure that that's a particularly great thing in general, but that's more because I don't care that much about like the crypto pricing stuff. So that seems like a good thing if you want to get out of WeatherXM. Maybe if you want to just trade easier, that's great. Overall, good to see that there's investment going into that space. And then they're opening up these Galaxy Quests. I've never been into those things. The whole Quest idea is something like, I don't know, like for a physical fox hunt in real space, that seems kind of cool. Quest Online, I don't know. It's just not my bag. I'm not saying it's bad. It's probably awesome. It's just not something that I've done. Over in Wi-Fi Dabbleland, interesting thing is Season 1 sold out with 1,000 units really quickly. Season 2 has sold 776 so far, so not quite as quickly. I think there was probably some initial appetite, and they kind of launched at the right time. But just good to see that they have, again, almost doubled the network. There's, 1 3/4? So that's pretty cool. And then let's see what I've got next. Silencio has got, there you go. Silencio's got a new website up. They had their SAM campaign that I just thought is like, I don't know, funny. They got a new website now to go check that out. And then the last thing that I've got is, I don't think I have a piece for it. Actually, I've got to figure out, I got to start paying more attention to the IoTeX folks. I just haven't touched them recently. Max and I run a GoldHawks validator for them. So, we're involved. We talked to Rollin. But what it looks like is those guys have been crushing over at Token 2049. They're putting on all kinds of events. They had the real world event. I think they had the highest attendance at one of those events they've ever had. So that's super cool to see. Yeah, really good to see those guys crushing. Let's see, 619, we're talking about WeatherXM again. You probably didn't connect the antenna wire internally. No, I took the whole thing apart. I did the whole thing twice. So took it apart. You take the various stacks apart. You move the antenna connection from the internal one. So you move that from the internal to the external. I mean, I'm definitely not an antenna expert, but it is also not the first time I've connected an IPEX or MCX connector. So impossible. I'm certainly not perfect, but yeah, that's totally possible what happened. What's up, Raptor? And then the last thing that I've got in my notes here, and I think we're going to, I just barely made it to the 15-minute mark, is to make sure that if you haven't checked out Flywheel Systems, there's a link in the description on YouTube to them, is they are just doing, in general, super good work with the, obviously, with the looks of this thing here. All the mistakes are mine. But they're also deploying these large fleets of DePIN miners. So if you want to get into DePIN miners and you want to work with one of the larger fleet managers, I would recommend reaching out to them. They're flywheel.systems. So that's the news that I've got. That's the kind of first 15 minutes. That was always the intent here, was to make the first 15 minutes kind of packed with all the DePIN news and get the DePIN overview. And then after that, be able to have time to just sit here and shoot the shit with you guys a little bit and see what is going down. I think I don't have a blank one in my little thing, so those will continue to say DePIN overview. I'll see if I can fix that. And I just haven't loaded that in. Kevin at Firewheel sent that to me, and I just haven't put it into my magical system here. So that's what's going on. What else is going on in the world of DePIN for you guys? I'm seeing a ton of action over at Token 2049. Max and I did not go to this one. It just seemed like, man, to get, was it 36 hours of travel to do a week over there and hang out with most of the same folks that we see anyway. I don't know if that was that big a value, especially when we've got a bunch of these articles we're pushing out on GoldHawks. And that's just, it sounds a little bit like it sounds a little bit weak, but it does take a lot of effort to go put these articles up, to write them down, to think about them, to make sure they're correctly done, to get the flow on them. So just way easier to sit down at the desk here in San Diego and do that stuff. So is Sourceful doing a rack buyback like GeoNet did? Oh, that's right. I forgot that GeoNet had done that. And GeoNet has blocked me, so I can't tag them on X when I put the articles out. The last one of which, the hex boosting, compared the GeoNet hex boosting system that Max and I designed to the Helium Mobile hex boosting system that Max was a part of. I would have loved to get folks in GeoNet to look at that, because obviously they implemented the thing we designed. And I think it was pretty favorable to them. But that's it. You still have a bunch of racks collecting dust. Yeah, I've got a couple racks. I wouldn't say they're collecting dust because they're inside their boxes, but yeah, they're certainly not doing what I would love to see them do. So that's the haps, folks. What else is going on in the world of DePIN? I'm trying to think. The Onakoi thing has been taking up a bunch of my time this last week. I went back and forth on whether or not to buy a choke ring antenna. I saw one on eBay. Pretty expensive. It was a Leica one. It's probably still up there for $1,500, which is batshit crazy. And then I talked with Simon on security about whether or not I should upgrade. We looked at the setup that I had and the number of satellites that I was seeing and the tokens I was earning. And he's like, dude, if you want to spend a ton of money on a badass antenna, you can, but there's basically no reason to. You're not going to get any lift. You're already doing about as well as you can do. So for folks looking to get into Onakoi, my experience so far has been get a nice receiver, get the SparkFun Mosaic X5, and then this is the kind of facetious piece, I think that's the right word, is get a great location. Because I think that's what Simon on security and I came down to, is like, hey, for some reason, and we laugh about this in San Diego with my DePIN buddies here, I happened whenever it was, we moved into this house in 2006, to accidentally pick probably the finest DePIN deployment location in the United States of America that wasn't on a mountain. For some reason, this place is like a weird radio wave badassness where when I put something up on the roof and I get it 10 feet above the roof or whatever it is, the Onakoi is definitely not 10 feet above the roof because you want a little bit more stable. But for whatever reason, I've just got a super nice RF environment set up. And so this thing is seeing 37 to 40 satellites all the time. It's interesting. It's an interesting piece because Onakoi does have this like setup where if you do have a better setup, you'll earn more and you'll end up, if other folks were already there with worse setups, you'll end up siphoning off tokens from them. So it's a little bit of a competitive environment. I'm not the most competitive person, but Just like every human, I like to win. It always cracks me up when people are like, I'm super competitive. I'm like, yeah, you have like 2 billion years of evolution making you competitive. Don't think that makes you special. It's like when people say I'm really curious. Like, yeah, everyone's fucking curious, man. That's how we got here. That's the deal. Let's see. What else have I been looking at? I listened to a pretty interesting podcast last night on, what was it? Modern Wisdom with, what's the dude's name? Eric something. And it made me really think about what DePIN is. And actually, this is a little bit of an interesting, for me, level set here, is for the past couple of years, DePIN has been a fun thing for me to do. Been super fun to learn about all the technologies, whether it's GNSS or LoRaWAN or whatever it is. Radio in general with the Wingbits stuff, 915, et cetera, down the line. All of these different things are pretty cool. What is interesting, and we'll get a little bit into election and politics here, so cover your ears if that makes you red in the face. But for the hypothesis that was on this podcast was that for years and years and years, the only two candidates, like America has this two-party system, the only two candidates that got in there were candidates that both sides and the world could live with, right? Maybe you didn't like one side or you didn't like the other, but you knew that those candidates weren't going to break international agreements. They weren't going to shake up the general, and I'm not saying this in a conspiracy way, but the general world order. When Trump came in 2016, he was super independent and was like, nope, that's not what I'm going to do. He made whatever actions he was going to make. And so when we look at this election now, the position of this podcast, or the guest on the podcast, was that he doesn't think that Trump will be allowed to win. So I'm not going to go into the politics of it and what I think is right or wrong or how you should vote. I thought it was much more interesting in terms of how does this impact DePIN, right? How does this impact a decentralized physical infrastructure network, or really a company, or really an ecosystem building with the idea that not only should value be decentralized, but also power should be decentralized. And I've written, or Max and I have written about on the GoldHawks blogs about on the GoldHawks blog about how power should be centralized to begin, and then should decentralize over the long term. We're seeing that with Helium. I think that's obvious that we should see that with Helium the first and the fastest. Some projects have decided to go decentralized from the beginning, and it just makes them a little bit slower as they launch. But if we look at this big picture here and we think about decentralization as this goal that all of us have, whether it's the decentralization of power or money, it makes a pretty interesting viewpoint for you to have as a member of the DePIN collective. You are basically saying, hey, I want the system to change in a really big way. And sometimes it can feel, a lot of times it doesn't feel like that. It just feels like, hey, I'm putting up these miners, I'm making my cryptocurrency, I'm earning as much as I can. And yeah, sure, decentralization is cool, but at the end of the day, I want these tokens to sell so I can pay my mortgage, right? I think that's what a lot of folks, however they put it, are pretty close to that. But what in actuality is happening is you're on the leading edge of this wave towards the decentralization of power. And so if you were to be conspiracy minded, and I'm generally not, you could think of yourself as a part of the Rebel Alliance. And what you're doing is making this change in the world that makes the world a little bit more of a fair place and distributes out the value and the power to folks who are contributing those two things. Now, the flip side of that is that without a centralized governing entity, the world can be a lot less safe, right? If there's not one big bully in the schoolyard to run over and break up fights, or to end fights, or to do whatever it is that big bullies or hall monitors or policemen or whatever you want to call America right now do, if there's nobody who can break up a fight, if there's nobody who can guide what's going on in the playground, that playground can get a lot more mean and nasty, and you can get some medium-sized bullies picking on and tearing apart other kids or other people. So I think that's the hazard on the other side. So as we go into this idea of, I want everything to be decentralized, keep in the back of your mind that maybe some things should not be as decentralized as we want them until we have really good systems. And that probably brings us back full circle to the Helium V3 piece, which is Helium is on the leading edge of the evolution of DePINs. It was the first DePIN out there. I know there's other projects that claim to be the first DePIN. I was just looking at one the other day where they're like, oh yeah, we were the first, decentralized real world something since 2020. It's like, come on, knock it off with that. I mean, not knock it off, do it, make it whatever claim you want. But I think it's pretty clear that the first one to get it right in a really big way, not the first one to have the idea, not the first one to ever touch it or to try it, but the first one to get it right was Helium. And so we can expect that the leading edge of evolution for DePINs, for the most part, will be in Helium. They've got this really big community. There's a ton of really smart people in there. You look at everyone from the top of the food chain with Amir at Nova, down to the rest of us, whether you're talking about Armand or James File or Max Gold or any of these folks who have really good ideas and are getting after it, or Siegfried, who's watching this. We've got a lot of really big brains on this thing. And there's also a lot of discussion about how to make it better and better. And so if you're looking at how does a project decentralize, probably in like the nicest balance of both mature adults, like looking at a problem and trying to solve it, and move fast and break things, which I think there's got to be a balance between those two things, between kind of moving forward and saying, hey, what we've got works. What we're seeing with Helium as they move to this V3 is probably a really good thing. Now, again, if you go back in the comments on YouTube, see that Siegfried has talked about, hey, this is opening up the debate space over the next couple of years. This isn't about what's going to happen tomorrow or this year or by the end of the year. I think that is an excellent perspective. Is what we're looking at here is this idea of like, hey, we don't have it right now. We don't have it quite right now. There are changes that we need to make. And whether those changes are, fundamentally we need to decentralize more, whether those changes are also and or fundamentally we need to make it easier for other projects to come in, right? If you think about it, we haven't seen that many different kinds of projects come into DePINs. If you go through, it's like, okay, there's weather, there's LoRaWAN, there is mobile, there's Wi-Fi, there's privacy, there is positioning, there is imagery, there's vehicles, right? So there's probably a couple more that I'm missing. So let's say there's like 10 or 15 sectors right now that are in DePIN, and of those 10 or 15 sectors, like only, 3 or 4 of them are really big and growing and kicking ass. Like, okay, how many sectors are there in the economy in general if we break that down? And maybe it's not thousands, but it's certainly going to be about 100 or not. So it'll certainly be 100 or more. So what is out there that we haven't seen yet? And if we look at this in terms of the evolution of any industry, the beginning of the industry is where we are now. So the kind of tired thing, like, hey, it's still the beginning. Yeah, it is still the beginning. Did you miss the giant big one in Helium? Yeah, if you're getting in now, you missed the giant big Helium piece. But just being in where you are now and understanding it and seeing what's going on in the DePIN space in general, you're still pretty early, and you should expect to see significant turbulence as we go on. It may take another couple years until we have something where it's like, okay, this is how you do DePIN in general. This is how you launch a project. This is how you message a project. This is how you manage the community. This is how you set up the incentives. All of those things are still pretty unknown. Helium managed to do a really good job with it. I think DIMO is doing a really good job with messaging out to the community. Anyone is doing a really good job with sending their message out to the community as well, through different channels. So we're seeing DIMO do a really good job on Discord. Anyone's doing a fantastic job on Twitter and Telegram, but there's still significant obstacles to all of these projects, right? My neighbor on one side understands what DePIN is because he and I have talked about it. My neighbor on the other side has no idea. Like, she and I have never talked about it. She's an older lady, not really interested in crypto. And so it may be that we have to age in to DePIN. And we talked about the seasons of DePIN last week. So the first season was just Helium, was just showing that the thing was possible. The second season was all the follow-on stuff, all the demos, the Hivemappers, the WeatherXMs, the rest of it. And now we're coming into the third season, which is, it's just the testing and proving ground of, hey, what worked? What was tried? What didn't work? And if you go to the hex boosting article, you can find it on Twitter. You can find it on the GoldHawks blog, which is goldandhawks.com. You can see that the hex boosting attempts, one of them didn't work, right? The one that Helium Mobile did, it didn't work the way we want it to work. But it was an attempt. And I think there's a really important piece here to say, hey, there is no and should be no penalty for making the attempt. The penalty should only be if you make the attempt, it fails, and you don't do anything, which is not what Helium's doing. It's like they made the attempt, it didn't work. They're going to make changes and come up with a new and better system, or modify the system as is. I think GeoNet should do the same thing. As they made the attempt, they changed. I think they changed in probably the wrong direction based on what I think they want, which is global total coverage and dominance. But that's fine. Like, everybody has license to do their own thing. And certainly Mike Horton at GeoNet he's the owner of the project. That one is a more centralized project, so they can move a lot faster. They can do whatever they want. That's fine. And kudos to Mike, by the way, for getting DePIN into Congress. I don't know if you guys saw this the other day, but in Congress, there was mention of GeoNet as one of these real world applications of crypto. So I'm sure that wasn't an accident. Mike's got good ties to the government. So I'm sure that was something that he did, and great job to him for putting the kind of DePIN name out there in the general world for the general public to see. Because at one point, or hopefully at one point in the future, if we get this right, if we steer the ship the right way, is we will have a place where DePIN is just part of the general lexicon. And it's assumed that on your house, you are providing coverage for whatever it is, whether it's weather information or any kind of wireless coverage from Wi-Fi to LoRaWAN to XYZ, and that you are reaping the rewards of providing all of these data streams and coverage to society. I think, that is the great hope of DePIN in general, and this decentralization of infrastructure in particular is we're going to see that kind of stuff. Now, that will also come with, right now we're so small that we've DePIN in general, even though it may seem big to us, it's certainly the center of my working world. So it seems like it's all around me, and it is all around me. Behind me, I've got a Weather XM. I've got the thing that's pulsing blue is the Anyone. Up on the roof is the Weather XM station. There's a Wingbits up there. There's an Onakoi up there. There's all kinds of DePIN pieces. So for me, I'm completely surrounded by it. The rest of the world is not. If I was going to go through my neighborhood, which is one of the kind of weirder neighborhoods in San Diego, I'm guessing that less than 1% of people I talk to would be like, oh yeah, I do DePIN too. So, maybe it's 5%, but it's some super low number in a neighborhood that I expect to have, if anything is going to happen, is going to be new. This crew is going to get into it. The place is called Normal Heights. It's known for being abnormal. You should come visit it because it's a rad place. You can cruise down Adams Ave and check out all the shops there. But I think where I'm going with this is that this DePIN thing is still new. We are going to see powerful players start to notice it and start to say, hey, I want a piece of that. I'm going to put that up there. I'm going to slap my name on DePIN. We're all already seeing that with less powerful players coming in saying like, oh, I've been doing DePIN since whatever. I think DePIN is the way to go. Like, it can be frustrating because like, where were you in 2020, 2021? But who cares? Who cares where they were in 2021? I'm sure that they were doing something badass in 2020 that I wasn't doing, and they could say the same thing to me. And I'm just psyched that they're a part of this ecosystem that we are all building together and make it bigger and bigger. Because at some point, if you think forward in the future, 10, 15, 20 years, and the DePIN experiment has played out and worked well, what it probably ends up meaning, and now I'm doing some hand wavy bullshit here, but I think this is pretty close to true, is that DePIN is the path to universal basic income, to UBI, right? But it's something. Where do I park in Normal Heights? So you could park anywhere. There's actually a lot of parking. There won't be any parking this weekend because there's a street fair going on. You have to go like a couple of blocks deep into each neighbor on the other side. But if we look at this thing, is right now each of us in the developed world with, let's just say, who are lucky enough to have a job, have a car, have a place to live, right? We're not struggling to survive. Maybe you're struggling, you don't have there's as much, the $1 billion that you want, but you're doing okay. Each of us is walking around throwing off all of this data. And the value of the data that we're throwing off is probably, if we were able to aggregate it, enough to make your mortgage or your rent payment. All right. And that means that if you're doing everything, I don't think that thing is particularly easy to do right now. And in some cases, there is no way to capture some of that data right now. So if we think of the very obvious way to capture some of that data, okay, you can put a Hivemapper camera, dash cam into your car, and you can collect that imagery and pass it over to Hivemapper. They can turn around, sell it. They pay you in tokens. You can take those tokens, do whatever you want with them. Maybe you sell some of those tokens and pay part of your mortgage. No one is saying, and I'm certainly not saying, that any specific DePIN project right now, unless it's going to be, a slight bump, is going to pay your mortgage or your car or your groceries in their entirety. At some point in the future, I think the great hope of DePIN is that it allows you to tap into the data and service streams that you can provide to society and turn that into a way to provide the basics, the basic necessities for yourself. And that's pretty exciting. That's also fairly scary to folks who are saying, hey, I would rather you have a W-2 job. I would rather you had a way for me to pull some strings and make sure that you do what I want. And I know as soon as any of us say any of this thing, is like, oh, that guy's a quack. So fine. If that's super important to you to call someone names, great, call them names. But just think about where this thing is going and what happens when just from moving through your general life, going and getting groceries, driving to work, driving to your buddy's house, going on vacation, doing whatever it is that you do. What if that means that you can now afford to pay for your house, put food on your table, and have the basics, right? And what we think of as like probably our luxuries, to have a cell phone, to have the ability to communicate with others, to have internet, like all of those things start to combine and say, okay, if you can do all that and you're now not like struggling for your general existence, what can you do? What does that unlock in the human potential? Now, for some folks, are just going to lay around and do nothing. I know a lot of folks think that that's the best thing possible. I'll tell you, I've had that point in my life where it's like, oh, you've got enough money, you can lay around and do nothing. That lasted for me for about 2 weeks. And it's like, dude, I cannot sit on the couch and do nothing. There's got to be something to do. And so, my wife and I re-entered the fray. And I would say, like this, there's interesting pieces here, is that doesn't always work out the way that you want it to work out, or the way you think it's going to work out. If you'd asked me in July of 2020, if I thought by that time next year I'd be some, giant guppy in a small pond, I would have said that's batshit crazy. But that ended up happening. So many other ways and twisting in which life goes. But if we think about this as this kind of big deal with DePIN and decentralization, it's pretty cool to think of yourself as contributing in a healthy and positive way, because you're providing data services to the general community. And also to know that at some point there are going to be major setbacks. There's going to be wrong turns that we take as a community. And it's on us to pay attention and see what's going on and to do our very best to fix it as we go, trusting that over the long term, we're going to end up with something that is much more fair for everyone. What's up, Fred? Fred Garner over on the YT. So I think that's most of what I've got today. I don't have any extra notes. If there's anything that you guys want to hit, drop it over on the YouTube comments. I tried to set up my little system here so that I could see the Twitch, I could see the Twitter, I could see the YouTube, and I think it's going one more place, LinkedIn. But I have failed in that attempt. I don't see anything on Twitter. I don't see any comments. I mean, I don't even see the post coming up or popping up. And on Twitch, I don't think anyone's over there anyway. So all the stuff that I'm seeing is on YouTube. So I think that's most of it. I think we can probably wrap it. Let's see what else is going on this week coming up. I've got a Twitter Spaces in, an hour and a half, I think at 11 o'clock with the folks over at Wolf. We'll talk more about this decentralization piece and what's going on in DePIN in general. There will be an article. I think we're going to drop it this Sunday. We might wait a week on anti-gaming and what's going on in the world of gaming and DePIN. I think that's going to be a pretty big deal. Kimbo, Helium Puppeteer. Yeah, right. So I think those are things to pay attention to. You're welcome to subscribe to that. The email for GoldHawks is free. You'll also see the same thing. I think I don't always put it out in the Gristle King email. And hacking this. I don't Twitch without adding high voltage. Yeah, I saw on, and now this is just like shit shooting. So if you want to do DePIN stuff, I think most of the stuff we talked about is good. I'm just shooting the shit with my buddies now. Hack on this thing. So I'm running Ecamm Live, and it gives you the ability to stream to YouTube, which is what I did for the first couple of years of this thing. And then a couple of weeks ago, I saw, I can also stream to X. And I was like, cool, I'll try that. And I saw the numbers on it jump up like crazy. I was like, okay, so people are following on X. That's interesting. And then I sat down this week. Let's see. Oh, Kimbo. Let's see. Rover for the win. You should check out that one. Yeah, I looked at Rover last week. I think those guys reached out and they're like, hey, do you want us to send you free hardware so you can test it? I was like, God, like the free hardware stuff is just, I don't really like that. Like every so often it's super nice. With the Onakoi stuff, it was super generous of the SparkFun folks to send me that. And it allowed me to do a couple things I probably wouldn't have been able to do the other way. But in general, I mean, Onakoi are clients, so I kind of expect that piece there. For folks who are just sending out free hardware, a lot of times It's nothing to do with the project itself. It just I don't have time to do it. So the rover stuff, I saw that seemed kind of interesting, but man, I'm slammed with a bunch of other stuff. But heck, to go back to the Twitch thing I saw this week, I was like, oh, cool. It lets me stream to LinkedIn and Twitch as well. Like, I'll try that and see what happens. And I don't know that either of those are particularly like the right platforms for the Gristle King kind of deep in message, but it doesn't hurt to do it. I live stream chicken hatching on Twitch and Kick. Streams are too long for Facebook and YouTube. Oh, the chicken hatching, huh? I would have just thought that you would just record that and speed it up. But I guess live streaming of chicken hatching is a thing in 2024. That's awesome. I'll have to go check it out. And I'll have to figure out how to use Twitch. If you go to the Gristle King Twitch, you'll see that I have no idea what I'm doing over there. And it's set up, but it looks to me like I've just got the background or something wrong on it. 619, I'll take that free hardware. Yeah. I mean, you did. I sent you I gave you the Wingbits stuff. So you're getting some of that. I'm trying to think. Most of the time, if people are like, hey, do you want free hardware? I just say no. So maybe I say send it to 619. At the end of the day with these projects, I think it's less about getting free stuff and more about like, hey, can I actually contribute to what you're doing? And is the value of this transaction going to be worth it for both parties, right? So they send out free hardware. If it just sits in a box in my office, that's no value to them. If they send me free hardware and I do a big write-up on it and they're not a client, then clients of mine are like, hey, what are we doing paying you when you're working on other projects? So I think it's a pretty straightforward thing, and hopefully it's as transparent as possible. That the intent here is, and that's what State of the Networks is, no one pays to be on this show so far. It's been a thing where it's like, hey, I just want to get these ideas about DePIN out. I want to make sure that if you want to look, 15 minutes a week and get all of the DePIN news in 15 minutes for the projects that I think are the biggest and reasonably legit projects, great. Come here on a Wednesday at 0900 Pacific. Tune in. After 15 minutes, you can bail. And then if you want to hang out and shoot the shit about DePIN, great. After that, that's what we did today for another, 30 minutes or so. And then after that, like if there's anything else that comes up, great. If we have these, Wazoo projects like the rover thing, cool. That's super cool. Go check it out. And just in general contributing. I mean, I think this goes back to hopefully the demonstration by action of the way that I think that we should all be involved in the DePIN space is you just contribute where you can. If you got a YouTube channel, great, cool. Highlight projects that are doing good things, that are trying things. If you don't, and you're just deploying stuff, that's cool too. D Vasilino wants rover hardware. Yeah. I mean, we can talk about it. And I think the other piece here that I think will start happening, or that I'd like to see start happening, is we get more folks on here. Usually Joey's on here with me from Helium Foundation, and we shoot the shit about what's going on in Helium and IoT. I know sometimes that goes off into the weeds of sensor devices and Medio Scientific. But I'd like to see more folks dropping in. Last week we had Professor Lambo from, what's the project? Oh, they're going to kill me for not remembering their name. The Mining Nothing Entropy Project. Come on. And that was super good to see all those folks come in here and shoot the shit about that. They did a pretty good YT raid, and we're crushing the chat in there. But I think it's like, hey, let's get the information out there as long as the project isn't clearly a red flag. And if it is, we can always do the red flag watch and let you know about what's going on. But in general, I would rather people know what's going on about the overall DePIN space. And then if specific projects want specific help, great, they can hire GoldHawks to help them do that. But overall, I wanted this to be a benefit to network and have people come on. Entropy paid my lawyer fees. I don't know what this is, what lawyer fees you had from Entropy, but I'm glad to see that any DePIN project is paying any DePIN fees in general. And I keep threatening to get out there and update one of my mountain installs and put Wingbits on it. I just haven't made the time to do that. And I think two weeks ago or a week ago, I went on this run that I just totally fucked up my feet. And I haven't been able to walk super well, certainly not well enough to walk and hike out to that thing and get out there. But when it is, I think that's the move, is to go out there, set up a pretty badass off-grid, really upgrade what I had. I think the other thing is probably get a weather station out there, would be super cool. And thank a crypto lawyer today. Okay. Are there crypto lawyers? Yeah. I think one thing that I saw, and this is interesting because we're now at the second deadline for taxes, right? For normal Americans who file their taxes on whatever it is, April 15th. Great. We're coming up, or if we pass the second deadline, which is sometime in September, for filing your taxes. One thing I haven't seen is a great crypto tax accountant who doesn't like make it all mysterious and bullshit, but they're just like, yeah, I understand crypto and I can do it. We had a guy last year who had said that, but it ended up being like not good enough to keep around for another year. I liked him, nice guy, but it was like, oh, this isn't what I want, and the price to pay for that was too much. I was thinking that this year might be the year you could feed stuff into an AI machine and have it spit your taxes out, but I think that might be next year. So you guys are starting to blow up the chat on YouTube again with this entropy thing. that all caught me off guard last year. Oh, cool. Thanks, Fred. Magic Cloud Money. We can double this link just by sharing with one person each time. Every time I do, I'm on. Yeah, cool. I think it'd be great if we get to a point where this thing becomes super useful to a wider and wider group of people. I'm certainly seeing that happen over the past couple of weeks, is that this has become more and more useful to more and more people as they watch it and are learning about DePIN. You know, the thing that makes it amazing. Oh, this is actually one thing that happened this week. Is I went to a party on Friday, birthday party for a buddy of mine. Met a dude I knew a long time ago who went into investment banking 30 years ago, something like that, and has been doing the VC thing ever since. We started talking. He asked what I was doing. I told him about the crypto thing. He's like, oh, I've heard about that. I'm not convinced on crypto. Like, convince me. So I said, well, it's not really my thing to convince you to do crypto. But if you want help with it, and if you want me to point you towards projects that you could invest in that I think are reasonable, knowing that crypto is super high risk, I'd be happy to do it. And he's like, yeah, totally. So I think that was like another piece that I saw anecdotal evidence, you know, not like a huge data set there. That's just one dude that I knew from 30 years ago. But it's a regular VC who is skeptical of crypto, and also saying like, hey, I might be willing to start putting money into this thing, just because they see some of the potential. So let's see, Free Shkreli. Oh, you can't read this because it's too small, but I will read it for you. Federally licensed tax pro here. Crypto taxes are really time consuming to do correctly for people involved in many projects and or trade all over the place. Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I also think this is like, there's this big opportunity for some egghead to sit down and be like, okay, all this shit is on a blockchain. You can't really hide it. It's on these different blockchains. Let's put all the wallets together. And then let's do this. And I haven't touched, there's like 3 pieces of software that are doing that. I haven't touched those in the past couple months, so I haven't seen any updates. But I think like fundamentally crypto taxes should actually be some of the easiest taxes to do because everything is on chain. Nothing is on like bits of paper tucked into your drawer or lost in the back of your car. Like, it's all there if you want to see it. So yeah, and software, I can't tell you what's completely missing for sure. Like the last time that I did the crypto tax stuff around April, putting everything into all the various, or putting all my various wallets in was like, oh, how does this connect to there? And where did this money come from? It's like, I would say it's not there yet, but certainly the hope is that should eventually be the absolute easiest thing to do, which is against what a lot of people got into crypto for, which is always kind of funny to me. People got into, original folks got into decentralize and hide their money. And in one sense, there's nothing that stops you from moving money around, but goddamn, a more traceable system, but I don't think you could find it. So yeah, shoebox full of transaction receipts. Yeah, totally. I have definitely operated like that. I had a buddy at one point. I was like, how are you doing your accounting? He's like, oh, I just have a shoebox and I put all my receipts in there. And then once a month I drive, and this is years ago, I drive the shoebox over to my accountant and say, here, my problem is now your problem. So yeah. And the crypto tax software that I've seen where you're dropping in all the wallet addresses, for supported chains, for the big ones, it's easy. For the small ones, wasn't quite there the last time I looked, but maybe I look at it again. I know when I was doing the Gristle crew, we talked to a couple crypto tax folks that seemed like they were going in this direction. So it will not surprise me if I'm behind the times on this and there's actually a really good solution out there. It also wouldn't surprise me if I'm still kind of in the hope and wait mode, and that it isn't actually out there quite yet. Although, hot damn, if you look at some of the workflows now where you're what did I see that Steph had said this morning on Twitter or on X, was like do a screen recording, put it into Loom Notes to clean it up, drop that into ChatGPT to see where you can automate it, and then put that into Cursor to automate it. So if you have like a process that you do over and over, I think we're not quite where it's really easy. And that is definitely what, if you guys remember the rabbit, which I've got sitting down here in a desk drawer, hasn't been turned on other than to update for a while. That was the promise of that thing, was that that can learn what you're doing and then automate it using AI. I think that's, you know, I'd like to, I'm holding on to mine. It's out of the box every so often. I turn it on and see what's new. I know that they just announced that learning mode, I think that learning mode is now active and they're testing it. Maybe they're testing it in beta. I haven't touched it in a long time, so I'm not sure exactly where it is, but yeah. Oh, cool. That's free. Shkreli. IRS is moving towards a new 1099 for KYC exchanges. It'll have some of the info like buying and selling stocks, those with a 1099B, and I'm sure they'll delay it. Yeah, I mean, I got a thing from Coinbase the other day for my personal account that I'd set up years and years and years ago saying, hey, we need to KYC you again. I think they do it once a year, something like that. So, oh, the 1099 DA for digital assets. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so there is certainly a lot to be done in that realm. Cool. I think that wraps it. If you want to pay attention to what's going on, if you want to talk about this more, I'll be on with the Wolf folks on Twitter, on X here in about an hour and a half. Otherwise, I will see you guys next week. Thanks so much for tuning in. Super good to see you, whether it was on X or YouTube or Twitch or LinkedIn. Thanks for coming on and sharing. Talk to you guys later. I'm out.